You know that you may be entitled to first-time penalty relief from the IRS. And here's relief that very few taxpayers know about. So many of you pay penalties unnecessarily. And if you're confronted with an IRS penalty for the first time, take a look to see if you're entitled to this relief. The penalties have to be for failing to file a tax return or not timely paying or deposited a tax due from you on time. Or if you have not previously been required to file a tax return, you could also be eligible for relief of that penalty. Here's an example. Sharon owns and operates her own flower shop. She's been doing so for 10 years, and she's always reported her business activity on a Schedule C to her personal 1040 income tax return. Over that 10 years, she's always filed her tax returns and always paid her estimated taxes on time. That is always, except for 1 year, and that was 2 years ago. In that year, she became preoccupied with her daughter's graduation, as well as the Christmas holidays, that she plain old forgot to make her $9,000 fourth quarter estimated tax payment to the IRS. And when she came to realize that she had forgotten to make that payment, it was already 1 month late. In a panic, she immediately arranged for the electronic IRS payment to be made, and some months later, she filed her tax return on time. After that, she received a letter from the IRS indicating that it was assessing penalties against her for having failed to make her payment on time. And those penalties and interest almost cost her $2,000. Since then, she's made all her estimated tax payments on time, just like she had before. And again, she only made one late payment. The solution is that Sharon needs to ask the IRS for relief from those penalties. And just by asking, she can save what it is that the IRS has assessed and charged her. And this is critical. There's no choice. She's entitled to it. This is an allowance that's given and extended to taxpayers who have followed the rules, but who from time to time may make a mistake. In other words, you're entitled to this type of relief if there's a single penalty assessed against you and no other penalties had been assessed against you over the last 3 years. So you could be entitled to the same relief twice over a 6-year period of time, for instance. But you first have to ask for that relief. There's nobody in the IRS, there's no arm of the IRS that's going to review your tax history to determine whether or not that assessment is appropriate and whether or not it should be abated. Remember, the IRS computer is automatically programmed to assess those penalties. And once it's abated, the interest that's also charged and assessed on those penalties will also be removed. You don't even have to argue that you had an excuse or that something upsetting was in your life that prevented you from doing what you have previously always done on time. This is an entitlement without a need for an excuse, if you will, or a reason. And you do not have to analyze your facts to determine whether or not there's, quote, reasonable cause. Now, I mention reasonable cause because when we focus on penalties, there are other ways to seek the removal of penalties based on upset in your life. And you'll see that in the following examples. But that upset is referred to as reasonable cause. And you'll want to follow up in that manner if you have penalties assessed against you for more than one period. In other words, if you're entitled to first-time penalty relief for the first penalty of a long series of penalties that have been assessed against you, take it. you're at least going to save yourself that amount of money. And then look at the remaining penalties and look to see and argue for relief under reasonable cause. These are things that are available to you as taxpayers, and they're things that many taxpayers either one, don't at all know about, or don't have a clear understanding how to go about utilizing them. But as you can see, just by making the request, just by reviewing your transcript, you'll be able to identify those penalties and you'll be able to take your steps easily to seek that abatement. And when you're talking about first-time penalty relief, whether it's a $2,000 penalty, a $6,000 penalty, or a $500 penalty, once it's abated, you're ahead.